Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's selection comes at us from Mateo. I believe Max Tundra's music is something special. Here's the latter of two magnum operas, had to look that one up, bookending his career so far. The final track on his latest album, 2007's Parallax Error, beheads you. So, that's what we're looking at. The song in question is called Until We Die, and as you can see, it is just over 11 minutes long. I have no idea what to expect, so let's dive into Max Tundra's work. Find out what he's bringing to the table today. Really strong start. Really fun percussion rhythms. Sonically, it's like being a kid in a candy store. There's just so many different instruments. They're all bright, energetic. Fat bass tone. It sounds like a synth though. There isn't a heart attack like if it would be a bass guitar. So that's a really playful 9, alternating 4 and 5 beats. What? The panning of that descending vibraphone. Falling thirds. Yeah. Interesting. We kind of shifted away from any sort of harmonic tonality there. Yeah, you could feel this halftime before we even got into this. Even the drum fill already indicated we were moving towards this. The music is super chill, but these lyrics are a bit filled with dread. Yeah. It's kind of reaching a point of too much though. Going back to my kid in the candy store, this is the sugar overdose. I'm sick of the sugar. The crispness of those bells over there, that was so good. We got the bendy sort of guitar sound over there on the over there on the right. This little synth line started out almost directly with the foundational section and then diverted from that on the second loop through. That was neat. When did we... Yeah, somewhere. Dang, what is that? Alternating 4/4 and 7/8? Is that 15/8? That's exactly, it's a 15-beat phrase, but in eighth notes. The warbly drone that's shifting, panning. The menacing bass that reminds me of Jaws for some reason, just like sitting under the floor bed, ready to jump out at me. A much needed contrast, I think. I'm not entirely sure I enjoy the execution, but the concept is sounds. Like I said, that very sugary sweet sound was getting to me. Definitely too much of a good thing at that point. Man, that hiccup is really tough to anticipate unless I'm counting. So I think we've actually added. The hiccup used to be a 15-beat phrase, but now we're back to a 9/4, alternating 4 and 5 again, I think. Completely altering the vibe without really changing the rhythmic element, the melodic element. Dude, this is so playful. Cutting out some of the embellishing sections, bringing in some space. So we're back to a 15 though. But it's 15 over 4, just a 15 beat phrase. Working in 4-4-4-3 as far as the counting goes. Oh, what? Huh? Jeez. Too chaotic. Let's cut off half the fat and get back to basics. Wow. That ending. Oh, jeez. That's a track, man. Where do I begin with this? Let's start with like the most surface level stuff and slowly work our way underneath that. Is fun. It's bouncy. It's catchy. It is infectiously happy. It's very danceable too. Um, it is just consistently bright, sugary sweet. Like I said, like a kid in a candy store is how I interpreted the beginning of this track. Primarily not just because of what each of the individual instruments sounded like, not because of what any of them were playing in isolation, but because all of it comes together with so many layers. No matter where you look, there is something sweet to hear. And all of it comes together into something that's very bright and bouncy and sugary as well. It's just a very positive overall quality to the track. Now, I did mention about 5 or 6 minutes in that I was getting a little sick of it. It was sugar overdose. It needed to be reeled back in a little bit, but I think that is a natural thing that happens. You let a kid go loose in a candy store and say, eat whatever you want, and they're going to get sick. It's going to become uncomfortable to be in their body having consumed so much sugar. You're going to get the stomach aches and all that stuff. So that's sort of metaphorically where I was at around that time. And I think it's really interesting that not too long after that, it's almost as if Max knew. He's like, this is too much. We got to back it off. He went to like the tonal opposite for a few minutes before returning back to something similar, but still the contrast was needed. And I think he had a really good instinct about where to begin implementing that contrast and how to go about it. And we'll talk about that later. But for the first 6 minutes, this is just very bright, cheerful, sunny skies, dancing flowers and trees. Very, very Disney-esque, early Disney-esque stuff going on here. It's just as far as positivity goes, but in a sonic landscape more so than a visual one. All of it to me sounds like it's done with a synthesizer or digitization of some sort. I don't think there's any acoustic instruments in here at all. It is impressive, though, with the variety of sounds, and this also goes to the candy shop metaphor, in that there just isn't a lack of timbres to be utilized. They have this massive range of sounds to them, and it's everything in between. We have, this sound over here that's kind of acoustic-ish, and then we have like this pure electronics side, and every piece of the spectrum in between feels like it gets utilized somewhere in this track. It is wild how many sounds there are, and it's one of my favorite things about electronic music, is that there just isn't a limitation to voices. Not even just available to you, but that you can utilize. You don't have to worry about the uh, any of the physical requirements for touring with every instrument you want to write for. You don't have to worry about trying to find somebody to play them all. The nice thing about electronic music is that a lot of the physical requirements are gone, and so it opens up the ability to utilize 170 different tones in your song and the ability to play that live if you decided to do live shows. Um, it's Yeah, it's awesome. It's my favorite thing about the genre easily. And it's what I like about this. Right from the start, I knew I was in for a good time when 30 seconds in, I think I had heard more than that number of seconds worth of instruments. And they all fit together really well. And it's just the production side of things here is really well done too. I want to remember to come back to production as well. Because right here, everything is very clean, it's very crisp, it's very clear, it's a very sterilized sound to everything. And I'm sure some people, especially much of the metal folk here, are going to find it too clean, too pristine, could use a little bit of grit. I can appreciate that perspective, and maybe that was a little bit of what made it too sugary sweet for me towards the middle. But it's not that way consistently, and I do want to bring this up later when we reach a different topic. But there is a production shift somewhere in this song, and I thought it was pretty clever. Um, Throughout this section, it is fairly linear. We do have in each cycle its own cyclical ideas, their own loops or riffs, ostinatos, whatever vocabulary you like. Um, But on the whole, I don't remember much of like coming back to the B section, or coming back to the C section or whatever. I don't really remember this idea of choruses too much. Maybe a little bit in that minute and a half block that we had vocals, but otherwise, this is a fairly linear journey. There's almost no callbacks or foreshadowing or recontextualizations of anything. There's no refrains. At least nothing that I picked up on that I remembered. Oh, hey, this is from 5 minutes ago. So I'd like to approach it from that perspective that it is more of a linear narrative than a loop-based song, something that I'm supposed to make connections between ideas and bring them all together. From the perspective of pure linearity, I do think that everything generally works well together. We have a small variety of sounds, particularly when we look at the first 6 minutes and the last 2 minutes. They all sort of share a similar vibe throughout them, but there are micro changes between them that allows them to stand out as individual parts from other places. And then we also have the droning bridge thing in the middle, which we'll have to get to later. That was a massive change from everything else, though, and much needed contrast, as I stated. Now, aside from just the surface level of stuff of, hey, this was bright and cheery and linear, there's some other cool stuff at play here, particularly in the way that things get layered. There is a ton of ornamentation in here. There's also a ton of I don't know if I should call it counterpoint in particular because I don't know if it's necessarily two melodies, but it is two melodic-ish ideas going off at the same time. We hear a ton of this, sometimes in a bit of call and response, sometimes in a bit of overlapping of ideas where maybe they'll play the same thing and then deviate and then come back together to play the same thing again, then deviate a little bit. A lot of that tends to happen with a lead melody and a foundational idea, maybe a chord progression with a rhythmic element to it, and the lead melody will play the chord progression for a little bit and then do their own thing and return back to playing a little bit of the chord progression. I like those little bits where the music tends to be a bit more modular in that no instrument is ever just doing one thing. We might have an instrument start out as ornamental, and then one of the ornamental bits ends up becoming a melody line where the lead melody ducks out and the ornamental smoothly transitions into becoming the focus. There's a lot of cool ways that it's not even just that an instrument can do multiple jobs. Is that one job tends to morph into another job. And I think those are some of the coolest things I heard in here. Just it gives me great joy. I think I even giggled a couple of times just hearing how non-conforming some of these ideas are. Something that I thought was one thing turns out to actually have been another one in disguise. It's actually really cool and refreshing to listen to. Um, I don't want to jump the gun on this, but I want to talk about it so bad. So let's just start a new timestamp here. Drumming. The rhythmic components of this track are bonkers. And I think part of it is just that it's not one drum section. Like in a rock band, you have your drummer. They're kind of stuck with what they can do, what kind of polyrhythms their brain will allow their limbs to produce, and the fact that they only have four limbs. So unless they're going to put a drumstick in their mouth or like in between their arms or something, you can only play four things at one time. Whereas here, again, without the physical limitations, there's a lot of percussion going on at any one time. And Max doesn't really have to worry about who's going to play it. He just writes it. And there's something really freeing about that. And it kind of harkens back to uh, earlier times where the composers would write music and then find people to play for them. No limitations on what you're playing. Whereas a rock band, you can only write for how big your band is. Occasionally, you might write for a choir and have, a guest choir on a track or something, but for the most part, you're restricted by your band. And this kind of electronic music kind of goes against that. We're just going to write what we want to write. It just, in this case, I don't have to figure things out later. It's just the computer will handle it. But yeah, there's a lot of percussion in here. Getting back to this. And through this, there's a lot of rhythmic devices going on. Now, sometimes the harmonic and melodic instruments are also carrying in on this, but if you really listen to the percussion throughout all this, like just tune out everything else and listen to the rhythmic stuff, you're going to find a ton of polyrhythm, you're going to find a ton of polymeter, you're going to find super complex drumming ideas and drumming patterns within single instruments. It honestly surprises me just how complex the rhythmic aspects of this track are, given the really strong harmonic and melodic elements. As I've mentioned in the past, in my experience, composers tend to be really good at melodic writing or really good at rhythmic writing, and it typically lines up with what instrument they learned originally. There are a few people who can cross that over, and I think Max might be one of them. But usually, you're as a composer, you're going to struggle writing one way or the other, because a lot of your experience tends to either be rhythmic or melodic and harmonic. Max can just do both. I mean, we have counterpoint in here. We have call and response. We have catchy melodies. There's all the hallmarks of really great melodic writing. But then the rhythmic element is also off the wall bonkers, jaw dropping cool stuff. And some of it even pushes against the time in a way that would make me think that he might have been a prog drummer sometime in his life. That doesn't necessarily need to be true, could just be really experienced writing more progressive rhythmic ideas. But yeah, I mean, there's just some wild stuff. I would love to see a drum cover of this just to see what somebody would have to do physically to keep up with some of it. Um, Even beyond that, though, apart from the instruments themselves, we also have the time signatures, which are all over the place. We kick the song off with a 9, alternating 4 and 5 bar ideas. 4 and 5 beat bars is what I meant to say. Later on, we eventually reach a 15-8, and then I think a 17-8, and then a 15-4, which is more of like 3 bars of 4 and then a bar of 3, which is probably how I'd write that, because 15-4 is kind of, that's not a great time signature. Better to chop that up a bit. But what's interesting too is that the 15-4 that we got at the end is very much a prog rock idea, where it's 4 bars of 4, but the last bar is just cut short a little bit. It removes one beat. But It sounds like that last beat was actually written and they just deleted it. It doesn't sound like a 15 beat idea. It sounds like a 16 beat idea that gets ended prematurely, which is something that prog rock does very well. It's about shortening an idea to fit within a different time signature. Now, usually you would do this to alternate from a 15 beat idea to a 16 beat idea to a 17, back to a 16, back to a 15, and have this feeling that the song is constantly lurching and jerking in different directions. But here we just stick with this shortened idea that hiccups into the loop all the time. But again, it's another aspect that, at least to me, feels very progressive. And not just progressive as an overall blanket, but actually very reminiscent of rhythmic and temporal devices utilized in prog rock. It makes me wonder who Max Tundra is, what his background is, um, where he learned to write like this. It is complex and deep in the ways that I more typically associate with prog rock, prog metal, classical, but it also has all of the technical elements of electronic music, different timbres, playing with filters, modulating sounds on the fly, um, having like 200 sounds in a single song. It also has a very poppy, bright aesthetic to the whole thing. And like I said, temporally, it's just all over the place. The rhythm is ridiculous. It feels like it draws inspiration from so much, but where he chooses to take this inspiration from doesn't feel like surface level ideas. It feels like something you'd have to have dedicated some time of your life to fully understanding, to being enveloped in that genre more so than, oh yeah, I want to make something that sounds poppy, and then you make something that is vaguely poppy, but when you dig into it, it's poppy on the surface level. The composition is nowhere near pop. Like, but no, this is on the surface level, all of these sounds, but also in depth, all of these sounds. And that's really impressive to me. Like I said, it really makes me wonder what kind of history and experience this person has into making something like this. Just kind of blows my mind. Now, there's the whole middle section. 6 minutes in, and we enter into droning on the sides. We have a bass tone that's just sort of slowly moving underneath everything. Like I said, to me, it feels like Jaws just sitting beneath the surface, ready to leap up and chomp at me for whatever reason. I don't know if it necessarily felt ominous, but it certainly, well, not. It didn't feel dangerous or scary, but it did feel ominous, just slightly full of tension. And like I said, I'm not sure what was going on with this part, but it was actually what I said was I appreciate the concept, but I'm not sure on the execution. And I think even at this point, I'm not sure on the execution. The concept is easy. It's contrast. We've had so much high energy, bright, poppy, sugary sweet stuff that we slow it down. We have this massive, drawn out, basically drone section with very little bit of bass movement. Um, very bass heavy resonance. No more of this bright, poppy, treble stuff. And it's just slow moving. It's a glacial pace. We sit in this forever while it makes these micro adjustments. It's something that rewards patience more so than the constant dopamine hit that the rest of the track gives you. You wait 5 seconds and something else is going to light up a piece of your brain. Um, and here it's like, no, you gotta sit in it. You gotta dwell in it. You gotta wait for the end. You gotta wait for the reward for sitting through it. I don't know that I necessarily enjoyed that. And now that I've vocalized a bit of my experience with pacing, which I hadn't considered yet, it does feel like it's too slowly paced, or at least I should say that I am set up to expect a level of pacing, and then he completely subverts it in a way that makes it feel too slow now because I was used to, it's like when you are going, 70, 80 miles an hour down the highway, and then you get to where you need to, and you get off the exit, and you're down to, 45 miles an hour or something, and like, that just doesn't feel fast. It feels like you're crawling now. Even worse is if you get into a residential area and you went from 80 to 30, and now it really feels like you're crawling. And it's about context. Your body, your perception, everything was used to this one speed, and now you're half of that, and so it's going to feel slower than usual. And that's what this, I don't know if that section really was as stagnant as I remember. I don't know if it lasted as long as I remember. But when the song gave me a new dopamine hit every 10 seconds, to hold one out on me for even 30 seconds, 40, and a minute feels like suffering. So, maybe that's intentional, though. I was going to say that I do think that the pacing was a bit off. I'm not entirely on board with the execution, though I do think we needed contrast there. But maybe that's also the purpose of it. I don't know. I was also considering the title during the section, Until We Die, and I was like, oh, maybe this is a musical concept of death, where before that, our brain is constantly hit with all sorts of signals from our senses and stuff like that, and then when we die, it's a bit duller. But then the song kicked back up again, so I was like, yeah, that probably isn't it. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that section. But, if nothing else, it has taken up a good chunk of this analysis segment, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't think a lot about it, and that I probably won't think a lot about it. It's going to be on my mind for a bit, and honestly, that's one of the best things that art can do, is make you think about something. Is there anything else in here? I don't think so. Let me hit some lyrics, see what's going on there. Alright. We have a verse, verse, chorus setup here. And again, I want to remind everyone that the lyrics take up a small section of this track. So, I was talking about structure earlier, and there is repetition here, but it's also within, for the most part, that contained section about through minutes like 3 to 5, something like that, 3 to 6. Here's the first thing I notice. All the verses are limericks. Limericks are I hope I'm right about this. Limericks are a meter and rhyme pattern for poetry where there's 5 lines and lines 1, 2, and 5 rhyme, but 3 and 4 have a different rhyme to them, and there's usually a different cadence for lines 3 and 4, also being a bit shorter there, so that there is a bit of length symmetry where lines 1 and 2 are about as long as 3, 4, and 5 because 3 and 4 are half length. And so we start off with the verse, did you ever see the holy mountain on ice? 30 tons of frogs and blood cascading like dice. The decoration painting was inhibited by fainting, and the cleanup operation wasn't nice. So we have ice, dice, and then painting, fainting, and then nice to bring us back to the original rhyme. Now, what does this mean, though? A holy mountain on ice with tons of frogs and blood rolling down it, and then a decoration painting was inhibited by fainting, and the cleanup wasn't nice. Like, does this make any sense to anyone? It doesn't to me. I don't think I've ever read a limerick that wasn't a bit fantastical. So maybe there's something I'm missing here. Maybe there's a correlation between some of this that I'm missing from a more figurative perspective, but it completely goes over me. And verse 2 isn't any different. So you did some work for me and you didn't get paid. Think of all the songs you sang and the love that you made. While Mr. Mendez kisses Kate, I in my kitchen break a plate and sweep it up and dream of getting laid. Again, the limerick, the AABBA rhyme scheme. But what does it mean? We have somebody who worked, they made songs and sang them, but they didn't get paid for any of it. A Mr. Mendez was kissing someone, and then somebody in the kitchen broke a plate and swept it up and dreamed of getting laid. I mean, I don't get it. The chorus here, the same one that we'll see later on after the next two verses, says, I don't know if you got my letter, but everyone thinks you're great. If you come home, it will be much better, and I'll be your mate until we die. This is interesting because it sets up the A-B rhyme scheme, but on the final one, when we rhyme mate with great, there's actually an extension to it, and I will be your mate until we die. And that removes the rhyme scheme. Well, it sets the rhyming to become interline at that point, but I don't know. The rhyme is in the middle of the sentence. Also, what does it mean though? I feel like I'm missing context for this. Uh verse 3 is about not being able to solve a Rubik's Cube. He says, don't peel the stickers off or move the pieces about. Just send it to this address. My underlings will do the rest, unless you fill the envelope with doubt. I kind of get it. It's a little bit about handing off stress and anxiety, but also about having other people do your work for you. But that's about as far as I can get there. And the last one says, as a child, I used to be obsessed with pale saints in a shop of art supplies among the sale paints. I thought the girl was Mariel and asked if she'd sing at my burial. That isn't me, she said with some restraint. I don't. It's about as nonsense as most of the lyrics I heard growing up. Although most of those lyrics I was also reading or being told when I was like in third grade, and they're supposed to be, like I said, a bit fantastical and even sometimes absurd. And maybe that's the point of this, is that it's all absurd. It certainly doesn't give me any more food for thought for the bridge, though. What is that supposed to represent in all of this? I was hoping for answers from the lyrics, and I think I'm left with even more questions than the music presented me. I'm going to wrap it up here then, at the risk of repeating myself in confusion, and ask if anybody else has any thoughts, opinions, or perspectives about this. Please put them in the comment section. I'm curious what other people get out of this. Above the comment section in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. It's a link to this menu. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of retro video game music, checking out a track from the game Secret of Mana. It was written by Hiroki Kikuta, and the track is called Meridian Dance. We'll also check out a special selection tomorrow. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.